The ridge looked harmless from far away, just a white line stitched across the mountainside, glittering under hard daylight. Up close, it was a strip of exposed snow and rock with nothing to hide behind and nowhere to run. The kind of place that turned a patrol into silhouettes. The first crack snapped the air so clean it felt like the sound had edges. Snow puffed from the ground a foot in front of the lead soldier's boot, and he flinched, half-turning as if the bullet had a direction he could see. The second crack took his leg out from under him. He folded without a shout, dropping into the snow like a puppet cut from its strings. "Contact! Down!" someone yelled, and the whole world tightened. The patrol scattered instinctively, 3 steps, 5 steps, until the third crack arrived and the fourth, and they realized the open ridge was a trap that punished movement. A man lunged forward anyway, grabbed the fallen point man by his webbing, and dragged him across the snow. The only cover was a rock barely bigger than a backpack, buried in windpack and old ice. The wounded man's shoulder thumped it, and the dragger tried to fold his body behind it like that could make him smaller than a bullet. The squad leader flattened behind another rock and got his radio up. "Falcon 2-1, check. Falcon 2-1, respond." He listened. Static, clipped and angry. He tried a different channel, then another. The noise changed but never became words. He switched to a higher power setting. The radio whined like it was trying to push through a wall. Jammed. The comms tech shouted from a few yards away, pressed into a shallow depression in the snow. "They are blanketing the valley." The squad leader didn't answer. His eyes were on the ridge line behind them, the shallow ravine ahead, the scattered boulders that made a jagged path through the open. The enemy wasn't spraying. They were placing. Every shot landed with purpose, snow puffs nudging them away from the ravine's only exit, bullets cracking above the rocks that tempted a head to rise. It felt less like being attacked and more like being arranged, herded into a geometric box of no-move space. Then there was another sound. Not the same crack whip of the rifles stitching the ridge. This one was deeper, sharper, with a snap that seemed to come from above. A marksman. Higher ground. Someone patient enough to wait for the moment a cheekbone cleared rock. Their own sniper was there, set up behind a boulder with his rifle tucked into the snow, optic shaded by a wrap, cheek pressed tight. He was decorated, loud in camp, a man used to being the answer. Now he shifted, tried to find the enemy through glare and distance, and every time he raised his head just enough to look, a round smacked the rock an inch from his face. The enemy had his number. The angle was wrong. The snow glare was brutal, and the highest shooter was punishing every peak like he could read their rhythm. "Sniper, you got eyes," the squad leader barked. The sniper cursed, low and tight. "No joy. He's got me pinned. I can't." A round hit the rock again. Chips flew. The sniper flinched back, blinking hard, and for the first time his confidence cracked into something like disbelief. Behind the squad leader, a woman lay low in the snow, body aligned with the ridge, rifle hugged to her chest, not like a trophy but like a tool. She wasn't in the lead cluster of voices, wasn't shouting ranges or brags. She just watched. The squad leader's gaze flicked to her because in chaos a still thing draws the eye. "Stay down," he snapped, more out of habit than strategy. "Just keep eyes. You're not moving." Someone else, breath ragged, muttered something that sounded like a joke swallowed by fear. "Extra weight on the hill. Paperwork add-on." The words drifted over her like wind. She didn't answer. She stayed past the rocks and snow puffs and measured the kill zone the way a mechanic listens to an engine. Another man broke from cover, sprinting low toward a boulder cluster farther along the ridge. He carried a radio pack high on his shoulders, antenna whipping. He was trying to get out of the jammer's blanket, to find a pocket where the signal could breathe. He didn't make it. A single shot cracked from somewhere off angle, clean, controlled, not part of the enemy's rhythm. The runner's body jerked mid-stride, and he collapsed face first into the snow, arms still reaching as if the next step existed. For half a second the patrol froze. Even the enemy fire stuttered, like someone had blinked. "Who fired?" the squad leader shouted, eyes snapping across his people. Nobody answered. The loud sniper's head whipped back. "Not me." The squad leader stared at him, disbelief sharpening into anger. Then who the hell? Before he could finish, another shot rang from that same unseen place. A man on the far side of the boulder cluster, enemy, wearing a darkest smear of winter camo, lifted an RPG tube onto his shoulder. The shot hit him before the tube aligned. He dropped, the weapon tumbling into the snow like a useless limb. The enemy's disciplined fire returned, but something had changed. Two key pieces were down, and neither kill matched the angles anyone in the patrol could claim. The squad leader felt the pattern form in his mind with the cold certainty of math. Somebody was shooting for them. Somebody they couldn't see. Somebody the enemy hadn't mapped. He risked a glance over his rock. Across the open snow, enemy figures shifted, tighter now, heads turning, weapons searching not just for the patrol but for the unseen shooter. The patrol realized the impossible truth at the same moment the enemy did. They were not the only hunted thing on the ridge. Hours earlier, the world had been quieter. At the outpost, dawn came thin and bright, the kind of light that made the snowfield corridor below look like a sheet of hammered metal. Wind whirred the tents and rattled the antenna mast. Inside the briefing shelter, heaters fought the cold and lost anyway. The squad stood in a half-circle around a folding table with a map pinned down by ammo tins. The squad leader, staff sergeant, steady hands, tired eyes, kept his voice low. He didn't waste words. We're going to verify the listening node up on the ridge. Tech sergeant will confirm integrity, swap the sensor package if needed. We're in and out. Extraction window is tight. Bird is not loitering in daylight if anything smells wrong. The tech sergeant, sleeves rolled under a parka, stood by a small hard case on the table. Inside, foam cradled a compact sensor package. Black, clean lines, the sort of quiet technology that didn't look like much but mattered more than anyone wanted to admit. Node's been sending weird telemetry, he said. Could be weather. Could be tampering. If it's compromised, they could be reading our patterns, timings, routes, who's where when. No one like that. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was believable. The loud sniper leaned against a support pole like he owned it. He wore the easy confidence of a man who'd never been embarrassed in front of his peers. If they're up there, he said, they'll regret it. The squad leader didn't bite. He just tapped the map. Long sight lines. Snow glare. Minimal cover on approach. We move disciplined. We don't chase. We don't get sucked into hero moves. A couple of soldiers snorted quietly at that, the kind of half-laugh that wasn't humor so much as a way to shake off tension. Someone murmured, "Tell that to him," with a nod toward the sniper. Near the back, the woman stood apart, hands on her gear, eyes on the map but not following the same lines as the rest. She was attached for Overwatch and Recon, specialist, quiet operator. Yet the way people looked past her said they didn't quite know what to do with her. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to be liked. She was, in their minds, something between an extra set of eyes and an administrative requirement. While the others argued over approach routes and extraction timing, she checked her rifle with ritual care. She kept her scope covers on until the last moment, like she respected the glass. She ran a fingertip along the bolt, felt for grit. She adjusted her cold weather wrap, the fabric dulling any shine. She slid a small range card into a pocket where she could touch it without looking. No bravado, just preparation. Somebody noticed her hands, small, quick, precise, and snorted. "You sure you're good in this cold?" he said, a grin hidden behind a scarf. Tiny fingers freeze first. A few chuckles. It wasn't cruelty, not exactly. It was the casual dismissal of people who equated size with endurance and volume with competence. She didn't react, didn't roll her eyes, didn't smile. She just listened, taking in tone and timing the same way she took in wind and distance. The squad leader pointed toward a thin line on the map. "We take the easy route. Con2 up, hit the saddle, push to the node. In, out." Her gaze lingered on a different line, an icy cut that ran along a wind-scoured edge, a shadowed rock seam that looked like nothing on the map but in reality could be a hidden path. Most people dismissed it as impossible. It was steep, thin ice over rock, and if you slipped you'd slide into open snow with no cover. But it was also an angle, a line of sight others wouldn't expect. She marked it anyway in her mind, not insisting, not arguing, just storing it. The comms tech spoke up. We've been getting intermittent interference in the valley. Satellite link is spotty in these folds. Radio should work line of sight. But, just saying. Terrain eats signals. The squad leader nodded once. Noted. The tech sergeant closed the hard case, snapped the latches. If it's been tampered with, he said, they could be using it to predict us. Or they are feeding false data to lure us where they want. The squad leader's eyes narrowed. We go prepared for contact. We don't assume anything is random. Outside the shelter, the wind had teeth. The mountains stewed like walls, beautiful and indifferent. The patrol moved out in a line that crunched the snow and left a dark scar of footprints that would last until the next storm. Breath fogged in front of faces. The sun climbed higher, turning the world white and bright. As they walked, the woman's dog tag chain shifted under her layers. It wasn't just a tag. There was an older insignia threaded onto it, worn smooth at the edges. A unit marker that didn't match this squad. A quiet hint that she'd been somewhere else, done something she didn't talk about. When the wind tugged her collar open for a moment, the metal caught light, then vanished again. The loud sniper noticed it, then looked away like it wasn't worth asking. People didn't ask her about her past. They assumed it was nothing, or that it would be revealed if it mattered. She never volunteered it. The ridge ahead glittered. By the time the ambush sprang, it was too late to change the route. They reached the approach to the listening node, a shallow saddle where the slope flattened just enough to make the snow look inviting. Scattered rocks broke the surface like black knuckles. The ravine ahead cut a shallow wound through the white, promising concealment but offering only a narrow exit line that any enemy with sense would cover. It was, in tactical terms, a place where intersecting fields of fire could turn the ground itself into a weapon. The first round snapped in not as a chaotic surprise, but as deliberate placement. One hit behind them, cutting off retreat. Another struck ahead, forcing hesitation. A third hit left, pushing them right. It was herding, not hunting. Down, the squad leader shouted, and bodies dropped behind rocks that were too small and too far apart. Snow puffed and sprayed. The sound of bullets cracking overhead merged with the dull thump of impact in packed powder. The squad leader's radio came up. Falcon 2-1, contact, contact, static shredded his words. He changed channels. Static. He hit the transmit again, increased power. The radio whined, and his battery indicator dipped faster than it should in the cold. The comms tech cursed. They're hitting us hard. Portable jammer, close. The loud sniper tried to do his job. He crawled to a better angle, raised his optic, and immediately a round smacked the rock in front of his face. He jerked back. Another round struck an inch higher. The enemy marksman was not just present. He was watching the sniper's rock, waiting for the smallest mistake. Can't get him, the sniper hissed, frustration edging toward panic. He's got high ground and I can't. A burst of fire hit their medic bag. It wasn't a lucky hit. It was aimed. The bag tore open, spilling bandages and tools into the snow like guts. The medic dragged it back, hands shaking, trying to gather what he could while keeping his head down. Medic's hit, someone shouted. No, Kit's hit, the medic yelled back, voice thin. I've got half. A teammate screamed. A round had torn into his leg, high and ugly. Blood spread through the snow, dark and shocking. Two soldiers tried to pull him, but every movement drew fire. They huddled behind a rock, the medic pressing a tourniquet with fingers that had already begun to stiffen from cold. Then the mortar bracketing started. The first impact landed short, far enough to be warning. Snow and rock erupted, peppering their backs. The second landed closer, walking in. The third was closer still. The pattern was clear. Someone was spotting for them, feeding corrections with discipline. The patrol compressed tighter behind their inadequate rocks, as if making themselves smaller could change physics. Ammo started to dissipate. Riflemen fired suppressive bursts into shadows and behind boulders, hoping to force heads down. The shots felt like throwing pebbles into a storm. Magazines clicked empty faster than they should. Breath came in ragged clouds. The squad leader did the math in his head, ammo, time, distance to the ravine exit, the bird's unwillingness to hover in daylight under threat. We don't move in the next 5, we lose extraction, he shouted, keeping his voice as calm as he could manage. We get stuck, we get encircled. The sniper took a shot anyway, anger pushing him past caution. He fired, then instinctively raised his head for a follow-up look. A round cracked so close it slapped his cheek with grit and stone chips. He jerked back with a strangled sound. His ego deflated, replaced by a stunned realization. He was being outplayed. The woman didn't look at him. She looked at the field. She watched where the bullets hit. Not just the rocks but the snow around them. She noticed how the fire shifted when someone moved, how it didn't chase randomly but guided. She noticed the triangle, 2 lower angles, and the high marksman, forming a box. She tracked rhythm, mortar thump, rifle cracks, brief lull, then adjustment. The enemy was breathing through their attack. A tiny glint line flashed near a rock lip across the open snow, almost invisible in the glare. Not a scope, not a helmet. Something thin and metallic. An antenna. The jammer's whip catching sunlight for a fraction of a second. Her heart didn't race. Her mind clicked into focus. She crawled to the squad leader, keeping her body low, moving only when the mortar impacts echoed, timing her motion with the enemy's noise. She touched his boot to get his attention. He looked down, eyes sharp. "What?" "I can fix the geometry," she said quietly. He blinked like he hadn't heard. "We need you here. Stay down." "I can get an angle," she insisted, still quiet, still controlled. "There's a seam on the right. Shadowed. I can see their support." "No," he snapped, not because he didn't believe her, but because leaders cling to what they can control when everything else is chaos. "We need every rifle on this line." She held his gaze for a beat. He saw something in her eyes that wasn't fear or bravado, just function, the look of someone who had already decided. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply waited for the next micro-lull, when the mortar impact landed and the enemy rifles adjusted, and then she moved. She stripped weight fast and silently, dropped her extra pouch, left her pack behind the rock, kept only what mattered. Rifle, minimal magazines, compact spotting tool. Movement was life. Ammo was precious. Every ounce counted when the ice wanted to pull her down the mountain. She slid away from the main cluster, hugging the ground, disappearing into the drift line that ran along the ridge. The wind scoured the edge, leaving patches of hard ice and exposed rock. The shadowed seam she'd marked in her mind was there, dark line between 2 ribs of stone, thin snow over slick surface. Most people would never take it in a fight. Too risky, too visible if you slipped. She took it anyway. Her body stayed low. She distributed weight carefully, testing each foothold with a rifle's forend before committing her boot. She moved like she wasn't trying to be fast. She was trying to be invisible. The cold air bit her lungs. Wind plucked at her hood. Behind her, the ridge cracked with gunfire and mortar thumps. But out here the sound was muted by distance and the way snow swallowed noise. Ice fractured under her boot once. Sharp, sudden. She froze mid-step, breath held, muscles locked. The crack echoed in her bones more than in the air. She waited, counting heartbeats, letting the sound vanish into the wind's constant hiss. No bullets came. No shouted warning. The enemy hadn't heard. She continued. A shallow pocket opened ahead, defilade, tucked behind a rock outcropping that blocked line of sight from the enemy's higher marksman. From here, the valley floor spread out in a new angle. The snow glare was still harsh, but the rocks threw shadows that made shapes easier to read. She eased her optic up, careful not to flash glass, and scanned. She found them quickly, not because they were sloppy, but because she knew what to look for. A small team near a boulder cluster, 2 men close, one with a compact device, antenna whip angled slightly, another watching the ridge through binoculars. Jammer team. Nearby, a spotter with a small tablet or notepad, signaling with subtle hand motions. Beyond them, a mortar tube partially hidden behind rocks, crew moving with practiced speed. Farther up, higher, the enemy marksman, Just a hint of movement, the unnatural stillness of someone who isn't scanning like a rifleman but waiting like a predator. Her optic began to fog at the edges from the temperature shift. Warm breath inside her wrap meeting cold air. She didn't rush. Rushing was how you made mistakes. She wiped slowly, adjusted her wrap, let the glass clay. The battlefield didn't care about her convenience. Then she saw the bundled figure near the jammer team. Smaller, moving under a load, forced to carry gear. A civilian porter. Collateral risk. Moral constraint. If she took the jammer operator at the wrong moment, the porter could fall into the line of fire, or she could put her round where it didn't belong. She waited. The porter shifted, stumbled. The jammer operator grabbed his sleeve, yanked him back like an object. The porter stepped away, trying to keep distance. That was the separation she needed. She settled her rifle into the snow, built a stable platform with her elbows and body weight. She controlled her breathing until the world narrowed to the reticle and the man's chest. Wind gusted, then eased. She took the shot in that calm pocket between gusts. The round hit, clean. The jammer operator dropped like he'd been unplugged. Across the ridge, the radio static changed. Not words yet, but the clipped, thick blanket of noise thinned for a half-second, like a door cracked open. Down in the kill zone, the squad leader heard it. A whisper of clarity in the radio before static surged again. His head snapped up, eyes searching, and for the first time he realized the impossible truth. Someone friendly had created that opening. The woman didn't pause to admire the effect. She shifted position immediately, dragging her rifle a foot to the left, changing her angle to avoid any easy traceback. She scanned for the spotter. The spotter raised a hand, making a small circular motion, correction for mortar. She timed her shot between his gesture and the mortar crew's next movement. The round struck, and the spotter collapsed backward into the snow. The mortar impacts changed. The next one landed wide, not walking in but drifting off, as if the hand guiding it had been cut. She counted rounds. She refused insurance shots. Every bullet had to matter. She moved after each shot, a few feet here, a foot there, keeping her silhouette low, avoiding creating a pattern. The enemy was competent. They would adapt. On the ridge, the loud sniper finally saw an opening in the enemy's fire. Not because he'd earned it, but because the enemy's coordination was fraying. He looked at the squad leader with confusion and something close to shame. "What's happening?" "Someone's giving us a gap," the squad leader said, voice tight. "We take it." The enemy ambush commander, hard to spot, but his posture gave him away, stood near the boulder cluster, stepping up onto a rock to shout orders. He was trying to reassert control, to pull the triangle back into shape. The woman watched him, felt the moment. This was the turning point. Not the most dramatic target, not the highest body count. The brain of the ambush, the hand that would pull them back into the kill box. She took the shot mid-command. He dropped mid-gesture, mouth open, words cut off. Enemy fire stuttered, not because they were cowards, but because humans hesitate when the voice they were following goes silent. Coordination fractured in that tiny space of uncertainty. The squad leader didn't waste it. "Smoke!" he shouted. "Bound by twos. Move the wounded." A smoke grenade popped, belching gray into the white world. It wasn't perfect concealment in daylight, but it broke the clean lines the enemy had been using. Two soldiers moved first, dragging the wounded man, boots digging trenches in the snow. Another pair covered, firing controlled bursts. Then they swapped, movement, cover, movement, discipline returning because the geometry had shifted in their favor. The enemy adapted fast. A small drone rose from behind rocks. Cheap, compact, its buzzing faint but distinct in the cold air. It climbed just enough to look down into shadows, searching for the glint of glass, the unnatural line of a rifle barrel. At the same time, two climbers peeled off from the boulder cluster, moving along the edge line, up the icy seam she'd used. Counterhunt. They didn't know exactly where she was, but they knew the angle had changed, and they knew someone was out there. Her scope wrap loosened as she shifted, a corner flipping. For a heartbeat, sunlight flashed off the glass. Her stomach tightened. That was how you died. One careless shimmer. She pressed snow onto the wrap, packed it tight, dulled the shine. Improvisation. Cold, wet, effective. The drone buzzed closer, drifting like an insect over the rock seam. She could try to hide and hope it missed her, or she could remove it. The safer choice was the harder one. She tracked it. The drone wobbled slightly in the wind, making it a frustrating target. She waited for it to hover, then squeezed. The shot clipped it. Enough. The drone lurched, spun, and dropped behind the rocks, buzzing dying into silence. She didn't stay to see it crash. She relocated immediately, crawling into a deeper shadow pocket, changing her angle so that if anyone had seen the shot, they'd be looking at her old position. Then she heard the sound that made the fight personal. Ice scraping. Not loud, not dramatic, just the subtle rasp of boot on thin crust, the kind of sound you notice only when you're listening for it. The climbers were close. Her breathing stayed controlled. Fear was there. She felt it as a cold pressure under her ribs, but it didn't get a vote. Function did. She shifted her rifle, checked her surroundings. In this terrain, close-range contact could happen in seconds. She didn't have the luxury of distance now. The enemy had brought the fight to her seam. Down on the ridge, the squad leader's people were moving, smoke drifting, wounded dragged, boots slipping. The extraction window was closing, but they were no longer frozen in place. The gap she created was becoming an exit. The enemy marksman, high-ground predator, understood what was happening. He wasn't going to let his ambush unravel. He repositioned, sliding along rocks, seeking an angle that would catch the unseen shooter as she moved. He was hunting her the way she'd been hunting his team, patiently, deliberately, confident in his own skill. A final duel formed in the bright snow, invisible to everyone else. She could feel it like pressure in the air. The high shooter had gone quiet, which meant he was moving. Quiet meant danger. She didn't chase his position with frantic scanning. She thought like him. If she were him, where would she go to catch the seam? Where would she set up to intercept her escape line? There was a rock, higher than the rest, with a natural shadow edge, a safe place a marksman would choose because it offered cover and a clean view. It was obvious, which meant it was dangerous. She didn't aim at the rock's center. She aimed at the shadow edge where a man would think he was invisible. She waited. A fraction of movement, just enough to confirm life. A hint of fabric. A breath of heat distorting air. She fired. The enemy marksman dropped behind his safe rock, but not into cover. Into stillness. For a heartbeat, the ridge felt quieter than it had any right to in a firefight. Then enemy rifle fire turned ragged, less disciplined, more angry than effective. Leaderless, their support cut, their predator down, they hesitated again, and hesitation in a coordinated attack was collapse. The squad leader saw the moment and pushed it. Move! Move now! His team bounded toward the ravine exit, dragging the wounded, smoke thinning but enough chaos in the air to blur outlines. They reached the cut, dropped into it, and disappeared from the ridge's killing whiteness into shadowed protection. The woman stayed a heartbeat longer, covering the last pair, firing only when needed, refusing to waste rounds. Then she pulled back into the seam, moving low, letting the wind erase her tracks as best it could. The climbers were still there. She could hear them, closer now, frustrated, searching. She didn't run. Running made noise. Running made mistakes. She moved with the same patient care she'd used on the way in. Only now the mountain had new hazards. Adrenaline shaking muscles, cold stiffening joints. The knowledge that a wrong step would slide her into open snow where any surviving rifleman could finish the job. A climber's silhouette appeared above, a dark shape against white glare, weapon angled down. He'd found her line. She didn't shoot immediately. The porter's bundled figure flashed in her mind. Collateral, consequences. She waited until she saw clean separation, until the angle gave a certainty. Then she fired once. The climber fell, sliding, his body leaving a dark smear against the snow before stopping against rocks. The second climber froze, shocked by the speed of it. That hesitation gave her space. She shifted, moved into deeper shadow, letting the mountains swallow her. Minutes later, the extraction bird arrived like a roar in a quiet world, rotors kicking snow into a blinding halo. The ravine exit opened onto a small flat patch where they could load quickly. The squad leader waved with his arm, signaling urgency. The wounded man was lifted first, grunting through clenched teeth. The medic climbed in after him, hands red and shaking. The loud sniper jumped in, eyes scanning the ridge with a look he couldn't name. The woman arrived last, slipping out of the seam like she'd never left. No dramatic entrance, no announcement, just a figure moving through white glare toward the open door. The squad leader caught her arm as she climbed. His grip was tight. "That was you." She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm with pride. She just nodded once, then climbed in. Only when the helicopter's door closed and the noise became a contained thunder did her hands start to shake. Not from cold, though the cold was there, but from the delayed release of tension. Fear finally getting its turn after function had finished speaking. She tucked her hands under her armpits, pressing them against warmth, and stared at the floor as the bird lifted. Snow spun below like a storm of powdered glass. Back at the outpost, the debrief room smelled like damp fabric and burnt coffee. Steam rose from mugs that went untouched. The squad leaders stood at the map again, but now the lines had blood on them. Not literal, but in the way his finger traced where they'd been pinned, where mortars had walked in, where smoke had saved them. He spoke in a measured voice, reconstructing the fight like an engineer reconstructs a collapse. "They had a portable jammer," he said. "Close. Blanket across the valley. They had a spotter feeding mortars. They had a marksman on high ground pinning our sniper. This wasn't random. This was set." The tech sergeant leaned forward, face tight. "They knew we were coming. They wanted the sensor package," the squad leader continued. "Or they wanted us. Alive, on camera. A propaganda win. Proof they can dictate this mountain. Jam us, trap us, take someone breathing and make it a message." The comms tech swallowed. That's why the jamming was so heavy. They weren't just trying to make it hard. They were trying to make it impossible for us to call anyone, so the story would be theirs. The squad leader nodded. "Exactly." He looked at the woman. "You saw it," he said. Not a question. She met his eyes. Her face was calm again, but there was a weight behind it. "The geometry was wrong," she said simply. "They weren't just killing. They were steering. They were protecting the jammer and the node approach. It only made sense if those were the center of gravity." The tech sergeant's jaw tightened. "The node." He opened his hard case. The sensor package sat inside, unscathed only because they'd never reached the node to swap it, because the ambush had hit earlier, exactly where it would catch them with the package still in hand. He pulled out a small component and turned it over. "If they compromised the node," he said, voice low, "they could have been reading patrol timing, setting us up. Today was a test, a way to see if we respond the same way every time." The squad leader's gaze hardened. They picked the ridge because they thought we'd take the easy route. The loud sniper shifted uncomfortably, arms crossed. For once he didn't have a clever comment. He stared at his boots like they had answers. The squad leader turned back to the woman. "How did you get that angle?" She hesitated, not because the explanation was complex, but because talking about it felt like turning something real into something reportable. "There was a seam," she said. "Shadowed. Wind scoured. Ice over rock. It's not on the map as a route. People don't take it because slipping is death. But it gave me line on their support. Jammer. Spotter. The rest was priority. Target ladder," the squad leader said, understanding. She nodded. "Force multipliers first," she said quietly. "Take the things that make them a unit. Not the bodies. The brain. The hands. The tools." The squad leader's eyes flicked to the loud sniper. Not accusing. Just acknowledging reality. "Our sniper couldn't break the high shooter," he said. "You did." The loud sniper swallowed. The humiliation was there, plain as frost. But beneath it something else moved, respect, maybe, or at least recognition. He cleared his throat. "I didn't see him," he admitted, voice rough. "I kept trying to win it straight on. He had the angle. He stopped, as if that was the most honesty he could afford. She didn't gloat. She didn't offer comfort. She just listened, the same way she'd listened in the briefing tent. The squad leader leaned back, exhaled. "And the insignia," he said, gesturing subtly toward her dog tag chain. "That older marker. It's not from our unit." The room went still in a different way than a firefight, a quiet that asked for truth. Her fingers drifted to the chain under her collar. She didn't pull it out, but she touched it like a bruise. "I was with another team," she said. "Different mountains. Same mistake. Comms dead. Pinned. Waiting for permission to move while the clock closed." The squad leader didn't interrupt. "They didn't come home," she finished. Her voice didn't break. It didn't need to. The weight was in the simplicity. "So when you told me to stay, I understood why you said it. But I also knew what happens when nobody changes the geometry." The squad leader's face softened, just a fraction. "You saved them," he said, meaning not just the wounded man but the whole unit's future. "You saved us." The tech sergeant looked down at the sensor case like it had turned heavier. "We need to assume the node is compromised," he said. "We need to change patterns. We need to sweep it hard." "We will," the squad leader promised. "But first," he looked around the room, eyes landing on each soldier. "We acknowledge what happened today. Not the story version. The real version." Silence. Then the loud sniper moved. He didn't give a speech. He didn't make a joke. He stood, crossed the room, and held out a pair of fresh gloves. Insulated, new, still stiff from not being worn. He'd probably been saving them for himself. For a day he'd decided he deserved comfort. He held them out to her without meeting her eyes. "Your hands," he said, voice low. "They were shaking. You still did it." She looked at the gloves, then at him. In his face she saw the cost of being outshot. Pride stripped, ego humbled, the uneasy realization that competence doesn't always look like what people expect. She took the gloves. "Thanks," she said, the word plain but real. The squad leader cleared his throat. "Debrief goes up the chain," he said. "They'll write it like doctrine, like everything happened by plan. But we know the truth. The truth is someone chose to move when protocol said stay." He looked at her again. "That decision," he said, "is why we're not calling families tonight." Her gaze dropped for a moment, then lifted. "I didn't do it to be seen," she said. "I know," the squad leader replied. "But you will be." Later, when the outpost settled and the wind returned to its usual voice, she stepped outside alone. The snow under the floodlights looked almost blue. The mountains rose around the camp like frozen waves. For a moment she stood in the bright cold with nobody watching. The day's violence felt far away, like something that had happened to someone else. Her breath fogged. Her hands, now in new gloves, were steady again. She looked up at the ridgeline in the distance, a thin white line against the dark mountain. Somewhere up there, in the seam of shadow and ice, the mountain still held the marks of what she'd done. Scrapes, footprints already softening, a dark smear where a climber had slid. She could have stayed out there longer, alone with the cold and the memories. The old insignia under her collar seemed to press against her skin, reminding her of the people who didn't come home in another place, another time. But behind her, inside the outpost, there were voices, quieter now, less sharp. A medic laughing softly at something. The squad leader giving a calm instruction. The loud sniper's voice, subdued, asking the comms tech a question instead of declaring an answer. Belonging wasn't granted by volume or reputation. It wasn't handed out in the briefing tent. It was earned in silence, in function, in the work done when no one else could see the angle. She took one last breath of the bright cold and turned back toward the light.